Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm in a new area today. Hopefully my new workbench. And I'm going to be doing something a little bit different and a little bit older. I'm going to be restoring a very nasty Texas Instruments TI-99 4A. This is just absolutely disgusting. I don't know if the camera can fully get the gist of how dirty this thing is. It is just absolutely just gross. So a little backstory with this one. I got it from a gentleman who's a eccentric collector of everything. He said he had an old computer, he didn't know how old, and it was in the original box, but it was just all destroyed and soaked in I don't even know what. I think I burned it. But it came with the power supply, the 2 cartridges, the joysticks, which I'll talk about later, and the video cable to hook up to an old monitor. But this thing needs a major restoration. I don't even know if it works because of all the crud that's on it. I don't know what this is, but hopefully we can get it a little cleaned up. Hopefully, because this thing has a very interesting history. So let's get some cleaning stuff. I'm going to be using my trusty generic glass cleaner, a degreaser, hide the branding, toothbrush, and some generic paper towels. Let's see if we can get these keycaps off. I don't know how they come off or what kind they are. I'm assuming they're some type of mechanical. I know screwdrivers are the worst thing to use right now, but I'm gentle. And one key. Before I do anything else, it is always a very good idea to take a picture of the keyboard layout, because this actually has an interesting quirk with the keyboard. And I'll talk about it a little bit later in the video, but there was really no standardization with keyboards back in the late 70s, even all the way up into the 80s. So you can see it's got the standard QWERTY layout, standard numeric keys, no function keys. The arrow directional keys they're not WASD like a lot of modern computers are. It's ESD and X. You have to use Shift. The other weird thing is no backspace key. Some of the reviews I've read on this thing and other videos, this is a huge negative about this machine. No dedicated backspace key. I have the owner's manual somewhere for this machine, but you have to hit Shift, I believe it's Shift and 1 for backspace when you're typing in basic programs. That's going to be a headache. But we're going to hopefully see if it works. If it works, I don't know yet. So let's get the keyboard disassembled, and hopefully nothing is overly broken. here's the main board. I got most of the stuff cleaned off this chip. This is actually the video control chip, not the CPU. And it's the only one that's socketed. Everyone else is soldered on, including all the RAM, the main 16-bit CPU. Oh nope, there's some stuff socketed up here. I just saw that. This thing's been repaired at some point, but I don't know when. Like I said, when I bought it, it was still in the original box, but it was just destroyed. I need to get that cleaned off. But for the most part, it's done. So we're going to do some deep cleaning on the keys, do some deep cleaning on all the metal parts and bits, and then get it put back together. And then test it. I hope it works. Okay, I've spent a lot of time diagnosing this motherboard, and sorry for the echo, I'm back in my other area. But because my dog freaks out if she's left alone for too long. But I tested the power brick to make sure it had the voltages and grounds where it's supposed to be, and it does. I tested the power supply board here, made sure that I was getting continuity here from the main plug, and it does. On the 4 pins here, which is what connects to the main board, I verified that +5, -5, and 12 are here. And there is continuity from here to here, so they look at these to work. And what happened was when I plugged this thing in, it'd give me nothing but static. Like absolutely nothing. So I went through and I checked every one of these important chips. The RAM, video chip, the interface chip for all the peripherals, the main CPU, the GROM chips, sound chip, all the chips I checked, and they all had voltages and grounds where they were supposed to. So I was actually leaning towards the video chip being bad, because it was whatever's happening is between here and the output itself. It actually ended up being something incredibly stupid that I feel stupid for not checking first, which was the RF modulator. And I'll go into that here in a minute, but I got kind of frustrated because I had tested all these chips several times. I used 2 different multimeters. For the chips I could actually look up information on. Some of these chips here really don't have much information on. They're just general IC chips. But these chips here, I'll get information on the CPU. And I kept coming up that everything was good, including the video chip. But I kept thinking the video chip was bad because it would just be nothing but static. So I set my voltmeter down, walked away so that I could go do something else. And when I came back and turned the machine on, I had it was a still staticky screen, but it was fuzzy. I could see the Texas Instruments logo, which I thought was weird because a minute ago I didn't have anything. So I grabbed my multimeter, and as soon as I lifted it, was sitting right here on the cord for the RF modulator. As soon as I picked it up, I lost everything. Set it back down, I started gaining a little bit of signal. So I took the 5-pin DIN connector apart for the modulator, and it turns out it had been repaired before. And I should have known that from the sound chip here, because this is not the original sound chip. This is the replacement model for the original sound chip. Because when I unsocketed these 3 and the video chip, there was a lot of oxidation and a lot of, not corrosion, but just black oxidation all over the pins. Cleaned them up. This one still looked brand new. Like the legs were brand new looking. So somebody had repaired this, and there was a lot of solder on the modulator, and turns out the 12 volt power wire, because it's kind of a weird design on the modulator, but there's a 12 volt line that goes from this to power the modulator, and it was actually just hanging on by a single thread of wire, and it wasn't getting enough signal strength to power the modulator. So when I set my voltmeter down on it, it actually made more contact, and it actually gave it a signal. So I have repaired that, and I'll show that off when I get this thing all put back together. But I thought I'd kind of show some of the chips and what some of these different chips are, and they're it's kind of weird how this whole computer's set up. So this is the main CPU, which is the TMS 990NL. This is actually a very strange chip. This was actually designed by Texas Instruments in the mid-70s, and it's actually a 16-bit CPU. Whereas most computers around this time that were of this micro computer size were 8-bit, like the 6510 and the VIC-20 and the 6502C that was in the Atari XE lines. This is actually a full 16-bit, but which makes this technically one of the first 16-bit micro home computers. But there's a catch, a little asterisk at the end of that. This is actually cut down using a 16 to 8 multiplexer to knock it down to 8-bit. Why Texas Instruments did that, I don't know, but they did, and it actually forced them to create a 4-cycle wait state, which basically means the CPU had to wait 4 cycles before it could run another calculation, which made this machine actually very slow to run typed in basic programs. And in fact, apparently this thing actually runs slower than even the VIC-20, which this is a 3 megahertz processor, and the VIC-20 has a 1 megahertz processor. So it's kind of weird that a slower computer actually runs faster than this, even though this has more memory. Speaking of the memory, there's the 16 kilobytes of RAM, is these 8 chips here, which these 4 are for the main RAM, and these 4 are for the video chip, which is where this computer gets its name. This is the TMS 9918A, which was a upgrade revision of the original 9918, which existed in the original TI 99/4s, which had a lot of graphic problems and lack of bit mode graphics, which really hindered the original model of this to almost have a bad reputation. But then we have the TMS 9901, which is the peripheral chip. This controls all the peripheral stuff like the floppy drives, the cassette drives, the serial interface, and that kind of stuff. We have the 3 GROM chips, or graphic ROM. This actually was a type of security for the Texas Instruments machine here to only allow Texas Instruments approved software and games to run on this machine. They were really hard on controlling what software went on this machine. They had to be in control of everything that came on this machine, which at the time was considered kind of a weird thing. Why would you do that? Why would you not allow third-party support? But nowadays that's actually, pretty common for like anti-piracy measures and stuff. We have the sound chip, which this is the very same sound chip. Well, this is actually a newer revision, but it's the same sound chip that Texas Instruments put in the Speak and Spell toys at around the same time. So if you've heard how those Speak and Spells sound and work, this is the same sound chip that powers it. Then we have the main system ROM here. And what this is the scratch pad RAM. And it's only 256 bytes of memory. And what it does is it acts as a kind of a type of a primitive L1 cache for the processor to help it run calculations faster. Which is strange because this thing still runs just incredibly, stupidly slower than most machines of the time. But other than that, the machine was not all that bad. In fact, it did sell quite a bit. This machine got involved with a price war with Jack Trammell's VIC-20 to the point where this machine was being sold to retailers for $100 to $150, which was under what this machine cost to produce. So Texas Instruments was losing money on the computer side. And I'm actually wanting to do a review video. This is just a restoration video for this machine, but I want to do a review video where I kind of go into a little bit of the weird history with this machine, why it was designed the way it was, and why it ultimately failed in the marketplace. Even though at one time it was actually a very popular selling machine because of its price, but with a lot of the quirks it has and a lot of the negatives it has, it doesn't surprise me that it failed, but it's also very surprising that the way things happen, that it didn't succeed in some ways. So let's get this machine put back together and see how it works. I am going to do an actual legitimate review on this machine in the very, very hopefully near future. I'm doing a lot more research on it, which is why the beginning part of this video, besides a few key parts, I wasn't talking too much, because I was actually talking about this machine and I was talking about some of the features of this machine, and I completely realized that the information I had written down, I got to a point where it started sounding a little bit odd for this machine, and then I realized I was talking about the original TI-99/4, not the 4A. So I goofed on that one, so I kind of hopefully muted most of my incoherent rambling and incorrect information. But yeah, so I'm going to just demonstrate this machine real quick. I'm not going to do a full review on it. But I am going to talk about a really nice feature of this real quick, is this keyboard. The original TI-99/4 had this really junk calculator chiclet style keyboard, which was just universally hated. And in fact, that's a running theme with a lot of 80s, well, 70s and 80s computers really, around this time, because they either used a keyboard like this, a full travel keyboard, or they used membrane, like on the ZX Spectrum and the ZX80 and the ZX81, or they used the chiclet keyboards like the PC Junior had, or the original 99/4 had. And they're just hated because you can't type on them for too long. You know, maybe if you're gonna one button type in programs, but for typing or productivity, it just wasn't all that great. And what I was talking about earlier with the RF modulator, this is the 5-pin DIN for it, and it plugs into the back. And in here in the shielding, when I took the shielding off and the metal casing here, it was just filled with liquid tape, which is like or maybe it was black silicone. It was really a pain to get rid of. So I actually had to cut the wire and restrip the wire, restrip all the internal wires, and I had to de-solder. I finally managed to get all that gunk off there, and it just, nothing was attached. It literally looked like somebody just pressed it onto the terminal end in here and then siliconed it to keep it on, which clearly it failed years later. I don't know when somebody repaired it, but they repaired it poorly. So let's get this plugged in and my TV turned on, which there's actually a very interesting coincidence with this television set. It is a Zenith set, and when I get to the full review, I'll talk about why it's such a coincidence that I have this television. It's almost a bit of coincidental irony, actually. But anyway, here's the full machine in use. Goes to press 1 for TI Basic. If you had a one of the cartridges, whether it be the game cartridge or software cartridge or application, you put it right in here, and it would actually have a second line that would say type 2 for, and it would actually know what cartridge was in here. There was it's called a BIOS ROM, or some sort of ROM that talks to the CPU directly, and it tells it what it is, so it actually knows that it's official hardware, which is important on this particular machine, this particular revision anyway. And it comes up with TI Basic Ready. TI Basic, apparently, from what I've done some research on for the review video, wasn't nearly as... It was a version of Basic that it was somewhat easy to learn, but it was somewhat limited in what it could do because of the weird CPU structure layout, apparently. I'm doing a lot more research. I don't want to say anything that's way wrong, but we're going to type in a simple basic program, which is the most basic of basic programs. And I do want to show something else real quick. I'm going to hit enter, go to the next line. If I press alpha lock here, it actually changes from lowercase to uppercase, but it's actually pretty annoying because it's not full upper and lowercase. If you can see it, the go-to is like a full pixel height, whereas the print hello is almost half height. So it's the full size, it's the full, you know, capital letter. They just shrunk it for the lowercase, which is really annoying. And then we're going to run. And it just prints hello. And actually, it looks like it's going slow. I was messing with the VIC-20, getting it cleaned up for a video I'm making on that, which is it's a lot easier to find information on the VIC-20, hilariously enough. But it seems like when I type in the exact same program on that, it seems to scroll it faster. So that's going to be something I touch on with this. Software reset here. This is a full mechanical keyboard. You know, it's, from what I can tell, it's I believe it's made by Alps. It uses Alps switches, which is not, you know, surprising because Commodore used, I believe they used Cherry switches in their 128, I believe is what used it. And something else that's really annoying with the lack of backspace key, you can't backspace. So if I was to type something in and say I completely screwed up. Okay, I screwed up hello. Oh no. You have to actually cursor over, and then you can retype from there. There is a way to do backspace, but I need to find the owner's manual because I believe it's I believe it's Control 2. No, that doesn't work. Okay, but Function 3 will actually clear the entire line. So it's one of the annoyances with this keyboard, even though it's a very nice feeling keyboard to type on. It's just kind of annoying to type on with that lack of backspace key, because now you can't, you know, you can't backspace. You have to delete the entire thing. That's something I'm going to touch on again when I do the full review about. That was one of the minor gripes with this machine, was that it just, the keyboard wasn't all that great. But, you know, for the time, it was what it was. So I'm going to look out for the review video that's going to be coming out. I'm going to take a lot of time and make sure I get as much information right as I can to ensure that I actually do a fair and honest review of this, because I've never, this computer, the VIC-20, they're all older than me by quite a bit. So I've never used one. So I'm starting fresh with using these machines here. So it's kind of like my review is going to be like the fresh. I've never used a computer like this before in my life. This is my review of it, which I hopefully is a fair review. Well, it's going to be a fair review, but I just hope that it comes across as fair and not biased towards one machine or the other. So until then, hope you enjoyed the video. Comment, like, and subscribe if you like the content and you want to see more. And I'll see you in the next video.